Good evening. The December 18th, 2024 meeting of the San Mateo County Board of Education will come to order. As is our practice, this meeting will be recorded. The board provides remote access for members of the public and welcomes community members joining in person and remotely. The board is following the requirements of Assembly Bill 2449, which enables remote participation by board members only under specific circumstances. We use simultaneous interpretation in Spanish for those attending virtually through the end of public comment. Translation will continue further into the meeting if people are utilizing the channel. Thank you to our interpreters, Ana Cruz and Polina Vasiliev, for joining us remotely. For meeting attendees wishing to access the Spanish translation channel on Zoom, click on the interpretation button on the menu bar. We ask all speakers to be mindful of the Spanish interpretation and speak slowly and clearly. I ask board members to speak directly into the microphone and remind speakers wearing masks to remove their masks when speaking in order to be clearly heard by all attendees. For item 1B, the county elected officials re-elected in the November 2024 election will now participate in the oath or affirmation of office. With respect to trustee area 7, only one person, Hugo Torres, was nominated for elective office. Pursuant to the California Education Code section 5326 and 5328, Trustee Torres is hereby seated at this organizational meeting of the board. Superintendent McGee will administer the oath to myself and Hugo Torres. For item 1C, so we're doing that before we go to 1C, sorry.
Yeah, why don't Hugo and Chelsea join me in the front of the room? If you guys want to stand, I think, do you want to face the audience or do you want to face the board? Or do you want to stand here and face everybody? Okay, perfect. So this is really a pleasure for me to do with you. And I'm going to, we're going to recite you'll recite the oath together, but I'll go slow at the start so you can each say your individual names. Okay. So and then state your name. Oh, sorry. Raise your right hand. And repeat after me. Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of California. That I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. You are now sworn in for a new term, County Board of Education. Congratulations. And thank you to all the audience members who are here to witness accepting a public service, which is a very big commitment from our resident citizen leaders.
Okay. For item 1C, The county elected officials newly elected in the November 2024 election will now participate in the oath or affirmation of office. Superintendent McGee will administer the oath to newly elected board members Mike O'Neill and Patricia Love.
We'll take the same stance here. I do want to acknowledge those in the audience that are here. I know Board Member Love's family is here. And I believe we have Supervisor Ray Mueller observing the ceremony. So thank you, Supervisor, for being here, and to all of our staff and other supporters. So we're going to do this a little bit different. You're each going to say your oath individually because it's your first time here at the County Board of Education. And we want to make sure we hear every word clearly from each of you. We'll go in alphabetical order, so that has you, Patricia, going first. And what I'm going to do is give you the microphone. And I'm going to use this microphone. Raise your right hand. I, and state your name,
I, Patricia Love,
do solemnly swear or affirm
solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend
will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of California.
and the Constitution of California.
Breath. That I take this obligation freely
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which
upon which
I am about to enter.
I am about to enter.
Congratulations, Board Member Love. Okay, Mr. O'Neill, your turn. I state your name,
I, Mike O'Neill,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United
the
States
Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of California,
and the Constitution of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations, Board Member O'Neill.
Thank you. Okay. Item 1D is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
There's a motion by trustee Gerard and a second by trustee Alvaro. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. The motion passes with a vote of 7-0, and the agenda for tonight's meeting has been approved. Item 2 is public comment. Guidelines for public comment are available on the SMCOE website and in board docs, as well as on the table outside the boardroom in both English and Spanish. If there are speakers who require Spanish interpretation, our interpreters, Ms. Cruz and Ms. Vasiliev, will interpret following each speaker's comments. At this time, members of the public may provide comment for topics not included on the approved agenda. The County Board of Education does not act upon any matter that has not been agendized, except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. It is the policy of the county board to refer matters raised in this forum to the superintendent for investigation and/or action where appropriate. Superintendent McGee, do we have any comments submitted prior to the meeting?
We do not.
Thank you. Speakers are invited to make a live comment and have 3 minutes to speak. The board's executive assistant, Jennifer Perna, will keep the time and advise when a speaker has 30 seconds left. Please keep within the time limits. To make a comment over Zoom, members of the public may use the raise hand feature. Instructions for using this feature are provided as an attachment in the board packet. Once the hand is raised, please wait to be acknowledged by Superintendent McGee. Superintendent McGee, are there any members of the public attending remotely who wish to make a comment at this time?
We have one member, Janice Pellizzari, and Janice, I'm going to click the button and you should be able to talk now.
Good evening, Board President Bernini, Board Trustees, Superintendent McGee. I'm here just to wish you all a happy holiday and let people know that we're working hard out there in all programs. And just want people to know that it seems like things are getting better, and I'm hoping I'm not just imagining it, but I don't think I am. And I want to also appreciate the board members who came to Gateway and did a little tour and took a look at our CTE classes and saw what we were doing out there now. And I think that's all. So happy holidays. And Patricia, so thankful that you're on the board. I'm looking forward to working with you guys. Bye.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
No other virtual
Thank you.
speakers.
Okay. Members of the public may also provide live comment in person. Superintendent McGee, are there any submitted cards?
We do not have any cards.
Okay. Public comment addressing a specific agenda item will be heard after the board's questions, comments, and discussion on the item. If members of the public wish to speak to a specific agenda item, please use the raised hand feature when the item is announced, or if in person, please submit a card in advance of the item. Item 3A is the election of board president. At this time, I would request that Superintendent McGee preside over the election of president for the San Mateo County Board of Education for 2025.
The gavel.
Oh. Yes.
Thank you, Board President Benini. This is the annual reorganization meeting for the County Board of Education, where annually you elect your upcoming president and vice president. Before we begin the nominations, are there any members of the public who wish to make comments? Okay, seeing none. Turning to the board, are there nominations from the board for board president of the San Mateo County Board of Education for 2025? Ms. Benini.
I would like to nominate Hugo Torres for president for 2025.
Okay, so we have a nomination. Is there a second? Ms. Gerard, second? Okay, we will take care of that.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Gerard. Are there any other nominations from the board for board president for 2025? Okay, seeing none, is there any discussion from the board? Okay, we will now, we have a nomination for Hugo Torres as president. We have a second, and we will now administer a roll call vote. Ms. Perna?
Ms. Alvaro,
Aye.
Mr. Camacho,
Aye.
Ms. Gerard,
Aye.
Ms. Love,
Aye.
Mr. O'Neill,
Aye.
Mr. Torres,
Aye.
Ms. Benini.
Aye.
I do believe by a majority vote of 7-0, Board Member Torres has just been elevated to President Torres. And I do believe there's a change of seating in motion. So Board President Torres, the rest of the meeting is yours, on your shoulders.
Awesome. Thank you. For item 3B is the election of the board vice president. Are there any members of the public wishing to make public comments on this agenda item?
I see no comments.
Thank you. Are there any nominations for the board vice president of the San Mateo County Board of Education for 2025? Ms. Benini?
I would like to nominate Beverly Gerard for Vice President for 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from trustee Benini and a second by trustee Alvaro. Are there any other nominations from the board for board vice president of the San Mateo County Board of Education for 2025? Is there any discussion from the board? Okay, we will now administer a roll call vote. When your name is called, please indicate by a yes or no whether you wish to vote for Ms. Gerard as the 2025 San Mateo County Board of Education Vice President. Ms. Perna, may I please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Alvaro,
Aye.
Ms. Benini,
Aye.
Mr. Camacho,
Aye.
Ms. Gerard,
Aye.
Ms. Love,
Aye.
Mr. O'Neill,
Aye.
Mr. Torres.
Aye. By a vote of 7-0, Beverly Gerard has been elected as the 2025 Vice President of the San Mateo County Board of Education. Congratulations. For item 4A, the December 2024 Employee of the Month, May Tran, Administrative Assistant 3, Office of the Superintendent. Will May please join me in the middle of the room? I love your fan club. So each month, the board and the superintendent recognize an employee for providing outstanding service. For the month of December, we recognize May Tran, Administrative Assistant 3 in the Superintendent's Office. May joined the County Office of Education in 2000. She supported several departments across the organization, including District Business Services for 16 years, before moving to the Superintendent's Office in June of 2022. There, she became an invaluable member of the communications and environmental literacy teams. May was instrumental in the design and implementation of the communications help desk ticketing system earlier this year and has since introduced the system to many departments. She monitors the system, assigns work to team members, follows up on projects as needed, and makes recommendations for improvements. May is responsible for reviewing and updating the county office website, helping to ensure it is compliant with the state and federal accessibility laws. She assists with drafting publications, including the county office's staff newsletter, Connections, a school news summary for district superintendents, and Eco Times, the environmental literacy newsletter. As an essential member of the environmental literacy team, May employs her keen skills in developing and shepherding requisitions, MOUs, and contracts. She also supported the organization and the implementation of several important environmental literacy events this year, including the Environmental Youth Leadership Summit, the Environmental Solutionary Teacher Fellowship Program, the Climate Ready Schools Symposium, and the Sharing Nature Workshop, where she skillfully led an activity that built on her deep connection with nature. That is a lot. May is always willing to step up and help with events outside of the regular workday. This year, she supported the Black Educators Welcome Reception, staying to ensure all details were addressed and that organizers and participants felt supported, and ably handled logistics at several weekend environmental literacy events. May is organized, detail-oriented, and can effectively juggle many tasks at the same time. She actively joins in and supports county office events, celebrates team members with thoughtful gestures, and has a smile and warm welcome for everyone. We are proud of our County Office of Education staff and are pleased to recognize May Tran for her outstanding work. Congratulations to May for being named Employee of the Month for December 2024. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Good evening, Board President Torres, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. Just want to really thank you for this recognition. And I really appreciate everything you guys do, in public services. And to Patricia and Julie, my two awesome supervisors. I've been working closely with them the past 2.5 years, and I'm deeply, appreciate your exceptional leadership. Always there to be available to listen to us, and always constantly asking us how we're doing, and really appreciate that. And consistently, offering suggestions and encourage us to move, grow personally and professionally. I'm really grateful for that. And to all the superintendent staff, always there to answer questions and there to help out and assisting whenever needed. Really grateful to be on the team, and thank you. Happy holidays, and wish you all a happy new year. Thank you.
Oh, one more before you leave. This is for you. So thank you so much. Thank you. For item 5A, Superintendent McGee will make a presentation honoring Chelsea Bonini's year of service as board president.
So this is always a kind of a special time to look back on a whole year of service and see all that has been and can be accomplished. Before I begin my comments, though, I want to direct everyone's attention to the front table. We have a tradition here of buying a new round of books for our Judy Mumma Hillcrest Library. And each book is in honor of the outgoing board president. and each book is has a stamp inside that I guess former President Benini has your name and service inside each book. So anytime a student in our Hillcrest Library pulls that book out off the shelf, they'll know that there is a caring leader in the community that is looking out for them, and your name will be attached to that. Additionally, our other tradition is the gavel plaque. Everybody needs a gavel plaque on their wall at some point, or in your garage or wherever it ends up. But it does speak to literally hours and hours of time spent on hard work in advocacy for not just the students in our program, but across the county, across the region, and across the state. So it's really actually a very meaningful designation about public service in honor of what's best for kids. And so your name is attached to that with the year of your board service 2024. And I won't do a formal like hand over to you. We'll leave it on display there, but do take that with you when you leave today. And then just turning to a few highlights of your service. This first photo is from the Kent Awards, which I believe you're involved in organizing, but also the San Mateo County School Boards Association honored our Safe Routes to Schools program this last year. And you can see that board members Gerard Torres and board president Benini were present to honor that really amazing, innovative work that we do here at the county office through Safe Routes. As I do in these moments, I pour back over the board minutes and read all of my notes and look at my calendar. And there's no way, President Benini, to capture everything that you've done this year. You're kind of everywhere all the time, and I very rarely know where you are, but there are some things that really rose to the top that were very out front and center that I was able to capture. And so I apologize for anything that's missing, but you know that last year in 2023, we revised all of our board policies, which is a huge task that the board took on. And this year, your job was to operationalize that into some sort of like flowing process, which is no easy task given both trying to sort out the cadence of the board policies as they come in, but also navigating the actual technical tool of Gamut, which is no easy task either. And then engaging the board subcommittee on what updates would be necessary, and then bringing it to the full board for discussion, working in tandem with County Attorney Cho and the county office staff. So that is a huge, huge task, and you're really exceptional at it. So you have been at the forefront of bringing these policies into the 21st century. So, and to keep it going so that we don't get behind. You are a ongoing, committed, passionate advocate for helping people understand the importance of learning to read and understanding the kinds of challenges that can get in the way of a young reader, particularly through disabilities like dyslexia, and coming up with policies and supports to ensure that kids get the instruction and supports that they need. The same would be true for how you stand up for special education and disability rights. One thing that I didn't list in the PowerPoint, but we worked together on bringing the transition fair to the county office this year at your request, and the building was full on a Saturday. There was a band out on the patio that I think we really enjoyed. There was great food here. There were amazing presentations, kids and families filling the building, and that is like a very real in time indication of the power of leadership and advocacy that you bring. This year, there was, it was last December that CSBA changed its direction on how it was wanting to structure the CCBE, the California County Boards of Education. There was a lot to understand about that. The board had many discussions. There's lots of leadership on this board around this issue. But I believe you, as the key author of the San Mateo County Board response to CSBA, became a model for all the other county boards of education across the state to follow, and really articulated the talking points and the real advocacy positions, including a lack of transparency and not a very good job of communicating what actually was happening. So you raised the challenges while also articulating the importance of the role of the county boards of education in that letter. It was highly effective and very powerful for the county board members across the state of California. For the board's governance, you were very interested and wanted to initiate a board governance calendar for the board. Again, these things kind of take a little bit of time to sort of test out as a draft and then see if that's what everybody wants to do. And I think we can still improve on the board governance calendar, but we have a functioning one. It's on the website, and it does provide additional information and guidance for the board members to do their work effectively under your leadership. And then Board President Torres will carry forward the work that you started drafting the board governance handbook. You've gotten the board really far ahead on that. And now it's a matter of fine tuning it and making sure everyone's voice is heard and reflected in the governance handbook. And I know you will continue to be an important part of that discussion, but thank you for however many hours it took you to put that together and bring it forward to the board. While doing all those things, I think you should win a separate gavel plaque for your subcommittee service. I think it's one thing to be on every subcommittee. It's another thing to be the chair of most of the subcommittees. This is a ton of work. It can be overwhelming especially when issues come up and are urgent and need to happen. Simply just getting everybody in the same place at the same time to have a conversation is a task that it can be very challenging. So you served as the board policy chair, the gateway chair, the superintendent salary chair, and the legislative chair. You sat on the interdistrict attendance appeal subcommittee, which gave you a little bit of relief, I believe, because I don't think there was much meeting there this year. But you were the county board's representative to the San Mateo County School Boards Association. Very active, lots of activities going on there, and lots of leadership involved. Inside the culture of the county office, you also make every effort to try and attend as many events as you possibly can. Again, I probably missed some, but I tried to capture what I had on my calendar and what I could remember. That was a really special day, the Fred Korematsu Day at the courthouse last February. We had our staff, big part of organizing that, and Jay Takahashi, one of our staff members here, played the role of Fred Korematsu that day in the courtroom. It's very powerful, and it was really great to have you be part of that. I know you attended the Climate Ready School Symposium and reported out in a board meeting how inspiring and impactful that was. So many 17th District, I should have put PTA in there, PTA events honoring SMCOE programs. That's volunteer where you're actually making cookies and bringing sandwiches and bringing lunches to our staff and celebrating them in special ways. You attended every graduation, went to as many school visits as you could possibly get in. And then in March, no, not in March, in June, you joined the march for our first participation in the San Mateo County Pride Parade, which is a really joyful, fun day. Glad to have you part of the team on that day. That's meaningful to not only our staff, but our districts and especially our students. They need adults standing up and walking for them in service of their civil rights and liberties. And then we did a really big thing last year. We produced the United for Youth Blueprint Vision 2030 around student behavioral health. And you stepped right up in your role as a commissioner to the Commission on Disabilities. And I think also in your role as a county board member represented on that work as a group, as a work group member, and produced a really powerful 5-year plan to raise up the needs of students in our county who are suffering in their mental health. Of course, lots of activities going on across the county all the time. The 17th District PTA doesn't just serve our own programs, but they also do all kinds of other events, Founders Day luncheon, the superintendent's lunch, and various meetings and convenings that they hold. I know you attended ribbon cuttings in the San Mateo Foster City School District because we were there together on those days. And then you also attended the San Mateo Foster City School District Summit on Science of Reading. You participated in most of the San Mateo Union High School District convenings that they call Let's Talk. And again, that's only some of the things that you've attended to support our districts, especially those in your trustee area. And I know, again, I'm missing things that you're doing statewide, but I do know you're a CSBA member, a delegate assembly member. Am I right about that? Yes, yeah. And I know that is time away from family, trips, and probably lots and lots of emails, reading through documents. So this picture is from the most recent CSBA annual education conference where we were able to gather with the board members and staff together for a really nice evening meal. And your statewide leadership is greatly honored and appreciated. So from the bottoms of our hearts at the County Office of Education, we thank you, President Bonini, for your service this year, and I'm sure that your fellow board members do as well. And we've saved their comments for the end of the program, and I'll turn it back over to President Torres. Thank you, President Bonini.
Thank you, Superintendent McGee and Ms. Benini. So for item 6A, the board will now take a brief recess in honor of outgoing 2024 Board President Chelsea Bonini. We will resume the meeting at 7:55. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you. That was delicious cake and cider. For item 7A, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the November 2024 regular board meeting as presented?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes made by trustee Alvaro and a second by trustee Gerard. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 7-0, and the minutes of the November 2024 regular board meeting have been approved. Item 8 is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is not debatable and requires a unanimous vote for passage. An item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular order of business for separate discussion and action, if any member of the board, the superintendent, or the public so requests. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second. Yeah.
There is a motion to approve the consent agenda made by trustee Gerard and a second by trustee Alvaro. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 7-0, and the consent agenda has been approved. For item 9A, Joy Dardanelle, Executive Director, District Improvement and Support, will provide a presentation on the 2024 Williams Annual Report specific to compliance reviews conducted in the county by the San Mateo County Office of Education staff. Executive Director Dardanelle, the floor is yours.
Why does this look so different today? Push. Looks different today, right? Oh, okay. So it is working? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Board President Torres, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. It's my pleasure today to be presenting our 2024 Williams Annual Report on countywide compliance reviews. This evening, my colleague Jeff Schmidt is ill, so I will be presenting by myself. And let's go ahead and get started. So according to AB 599 for the Williams Act, there is new criteria this year, the 24-25 school year for Williams, including schools that were identified for comprehensive supports and improvement, which we often call CSI, and additional targeted support and improvement, which is often referred to as ATSI. Schools also where 15 or more % of the teachers hold permit certificates or other authorization that's less than the certification of a preliminary or clear credential are also on this list. I'll point out that that group of teachers and schools that are identified for that reason for credentialing is the one that is the most unexpected. Because with CSI and ATSI, we see indicators coming up on the dashboard so that we know. But in terms of the teacher credentialing, it can be variable and surprising at times. So this year, the 24-25 school year was also the first year where charter schools were identified for Williams compliance reviews. And just to note, Dashboard Alternative Schools, which we sometimes call DAS schools, are exempt from Williams visits. So the timeline actually starts in the spring, even though our visits actually happen in the fall. In March of 2024, we start training our new LEAs. And then in June, we start to do outreach to the specific sites, including talking with principals and collecting instructional materials from coordinators, and also working with their facility directors. This year, between August 19th and September 13th, we scheduled all of our visits, and we completed them all on time. So just to know a little bit more, in terms of the identification for this group, we had 5 CSI schools and 6 ATSI schools, as well as 8 schools that were identified for teacher credentialing. 19 schools is reasonable for our staff. And you'll see that in terms of looking at estimates for the following years, a lot of county offices were concerned about the possible increase of CSI and ATSI schools moving forward. But currently, the number of schools that were identified was 19. In summary, for instructional materials, we had 100% of classrooms that had sufficient textbooks and instructional materials. There were 0 5-day letters that were issued, meaning that they were all sufficient upon the first visit versus needing to have corrections. Some of the noticings that we had from the field, observations from the field, were that there's definitely an increase more in using digital materials. School districts were responsible and also showed documentation for how they were supporting students using digital materials, including providing devices and hotspots to ensure that students had access to Wi-Fi. We also heard appreciation from school sites thanking us for that support to ensure that they got all of their ducks in a row prior to students arriving. And that was one of the pieces of feedback that we heard from districts in doing the reviews in the beginning of the year. The second part of our review includes the facilities review. We use a form, the FIT form, to the facilities inspection tool to look at all the school facilities. There were no extreme deficiencies in any of the schools. One of the things, though, in terms of just observations from the field that we saw this year was that schools are still struggling a little bit with the menstrual equity for all, meaning that in prior years, it was required that they had menstrual products in all women's bathrooms, all gender bathrooms, and at least one men's bathroom in grades 6 through 12. And this year we were checking from grades 3 and up. And some of the schools were having difficulty with that in terms of ensuring that there were free and accessible menstrual products available in all of those locations, partially because of vandalism and some discipline issues where some of the students didn't know what to do with the newfound products that they were seeing appearing in their bathroom. And so there were some vandalism challenges. So our team, in having those conversations, made sure that we also talked with them about different types of resources like positive behaviors, interventions, and supports, or other ways of ensuring that the schools were helping to support their students and knowing how to interact with the materials that they were finding in the bathroom in a way that was appropriate. We also checked for the school accountability report cards for all of the districts, all of the schools that we were checking. And all of the SARCs that we reviewed met the basic reporting requirements for the instructional materials, credentialing, and facilities. We also today are reporting on our uniform complaint procedures that get sent to the county office. In the first quarter, we had 0. In the second quarter, there was 1 for insufficiency of textbooks, which was resolved prior to today. And then 2 in the third quarter, 1 for teacher vacancy, and which was resolved, and the other one for facilities. The fourth one was for facilities, and it was also resolved in a timely manner. So between when this slide was created and today, we got new information, but I'll present the information first that's on this slide, and then I'll give you an update. So we had to create an estimate of what we thought may be the estimate for the schools identified for the 2025-2028 year. It's important for us to estimate these things because we have to create plans for how we're going to staff that many visits if we had 65 to 75 schools, when this year we had 19. And it all has to be done within a short period of time. So our original estimate in looking was that we would anticipate 10 CSI schools and 35 to 40 ATSI schools, and then possibly another 20 to 25 schools for teacher credentialing. Since the dashboard just was released, we have some new updates on that. And so there are 3 schools, and only 3 schools identified for CSI. There are 9 schools identified for ATSI, which is 12 versus 45. And we still, again, don't know about the number for teacher credentialing. That's the one that we can't really predict ahead of time until we get the information from the CDE in terms of schools that don't meet the credentialing requirements. So our next steps are that we're still waiting for that official Williams list, and that's going to be expected in January. That will include the CSI schools, the ATSI schools, and the schools that are qualifying because of teacher credentialing. Similar to past years, in March, we're going to start rolling out our training for any of the new LEAs, the new schools that are going to be participating in the reviews. And then in April through May, we're going to start collecting the documentation from those schools. In May through June, we'll be scheduling all of our site visits. And then July through September, we're hoping to take care of it all in an efficient way so that we could come back here and share more stories from the field, and hopefully with stories of how people are really figuring out how to meet the needs of students every year as we have new challenges and new ways of and new expectations really of how students are experiencing school. With that said, thank you. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Ms. Alvaro?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joy. I just had a question about when you were talking about trying to predict. I mean, good luck. You need to buy you a crystal ball, because are there any schools that overlap? And I realize CSI and ATSI are different, but the ones with teacher credentialing issues, could that potentially be a school that's already identified as either CSI or ATSI?
Yes. And so if they're already identified for CSI or ATSI, we wouldn't count them as one for teacher credentialing, because those would be the ones that would be in addition to ones that were already identified.
Well, in terms of staffing, I mean, you're already going out there, so.
Yes.
That's it. So but you're really just not sure yet where that falls in.
Yes, we're not sure.
Okay, all right,
So-
thank you.
We have actually tried to work with our internal staff also in HR to try to figure it out ahead of time, just so that we can predict. But the way of pulling the data out at a site-by-site level across the entire county would be very labor intensive.
Any other questions or comments? I have two. For the menstrual products, I know that weren't in the bathroom. Was it that they had them, they just didn't place them in the bathroom, or they didn't even have them?
That's a great question. So most schools actually had the machines available and products within the machines, but what we were hearing was that students would find them and then do things with them that would lead to vandalization. So it might be that you would see products that were stuck on the ceiling, or people would just start taking them and bringing them to all different places. The Menstrual Equity Act actually ensures the privacy for students. So some of the ways that schools were trying to solve this problem was to pass out tokens and to people who may need them. And then to say, when you need it, come to the nearest classroom and we'll give you products. Or when you need it, come to the office and we'll give you products. But that's not in the spirit of the law. The law is that it should be available in a private setting and always be accessible from grades 3 through 12. And so that was what we were hearing.
Thank you. And then my second question is, I know you mentioned that there was an increase in digital materials. When they're doing the visits and checking, are they only looking at the physical, or do they have something to assess and look for all the digital materials as well?
So we look for digital materials, including licenses. So they actually have to show us the product codes per student to ensure that each student actually has individual access to the materials, plus all documentation for Wi-Fi and access and hotspots when requested.
You guys are amazing.
Thank you.
Those are all my questions. Thank you. Are there any comments from the public?
No comments.
There is no action to take on this item.
Thank you.
Thank you. For item 9B, Jared Prolo, Executive Director, Research and Systems Planning Educational Services Division, will present the 2024 California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, CASP, and the 2024 California School Dashboard. Executive Director, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Board President Torres, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. Did you turn it off, Joy? Maybe there. Thank you. Good evening, Board President Torres, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. I'm here to present information on the California School Dashboard. In this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the dashboard. We'll have some time to look at insights into county-wide trends, and then we'll have some time to talk about accountability identifications. The 2024 dashboard is the first year that we'll actually have a truly complete dashboard. It has been a long tail of the impacts of the pandemic interrupting some of the indicators, some of our ability to look at change over time. And now for the first time since 2019, all indicators are on the dashboard and all of them are fully represented with colors. There is a small exception to that in that this is the first year science is being reported. The science assessment is reported on the dashboard, but it's for information only. You will see on the dashboard status and change information for all students, but there is no color represented because they haven't made the 5x5 chart. They don't know what the cut scores are going to be yet or where the change cuts are going to be. So it is for information only this year. As a reminder, the performance levels are assigned on this 5x5 grid, which is a combination of the vertical axis being the status, the last year's overall performance, and then the change compared to the prior year. Further up and right is better because that is both higher performance and more growth. And each of those squares are assigned a color. And every 5x5 is a little bit different. So even among the same indicator, high schools have different cut points for suspension rate than elementary schools do. So it is dependent on the indicator and the grade level for each case. On the dashboard, they have these little baseball cards. The state calls them baseball cards that show the every student group with their indicator and some information about the sample size of how many students are in that student group, along with the status and the change for each case. And so this would be the place to get all of that information about each of the student groups when you visit the dashboard. In general, we want to make sure that we're using the dashboard in the right way. And it is large-scale summative data. All of these things are generated once a year. And this is really the place not to find answers, but to ask better questions. And so oftentimes we'll look at this and say like, oh, why is this happening? And that's a great question. And you can't answer that just with the dashboard. That's where schools and communities need to work together to dig a little bit deeper and do some inquiry and find more information about what might be root causes. Another thing that's really valuable about the dashboard is looking at those student groups. And so there's this equity report that happens on each of those baseball cards that shows where each of the student groups show up. And I always like this example because of the fact that the school district for English language arts is in the green indicator, which is generally thought of as good. But you dig a little deeper and you see that 7 of the student groups are in the red and orange indicator, and 4 of the student groups are in the blue and green. And so the question should be asked is, why is school working very, very well for some of these students and not working for some of the other students? For each of the indicators, I did include some information from the state that goes over a little bit of detail of where the indicators come from. Sometimes it's difficult to track what year and who is part of the indicator. So for each of these slides I have for your reference, who is included in them. The academic performance being the English language arts and math assessments. To kind of give you an idea of what is generally happening across the county, I made these charts. Each of these dots is a student group at a school in our county. So these are all the student groups at all of the schools in our county. The size of the dot is the number of students, so larger dots are larger student groups. and the color corresponds with the color that's reported for each of the student groups on the dashboard. There's a lot of information in here, and so I want to be clear, these aren't really meant to be like, let's dig into detail. These are more vibes charts. We're just kind of getting a sense of like where about we're seeing things. Are we seeing more students above or below that sort of middle performance line? Are we seeing more students experiencing growth or experiencing decline? One of the things that I think you'll see in a lot of these cases is the largest differences in change are oftentimes these little tiny dots, just speaking to the higher degree of variability that's inherent to small student groups. And so for English language arts, we see that it's mostly vertically oriented. We don't see a lot of change. Students who are doing well continue to do well. Students who are not performing as highly continue not to perform as highly, and there's not a lot of change. It is a similar story in mathematics, that it is that sort of like very vertically oriented, mostly centered around that no change mark. And that is pretty consistent with what we saw with the overall CASP results and relatively consistent with the trends that we're seeing statewide. Chronic absenteeism, yes. Yep.
Quickly, but before we go too far, can you explain the axes real quickly?
Yeah, so it is, the vertical axis is that status, so it's arranged like the 5x5 chart. So in this case, it is the distance from level 3 that's charted on each of those. So level 3 being meeting standard. And so that 0 line is where like exactly meeting standard would be. And then the horizontal axis is the change compared to the prior year. So I put a little guidepost there. The horizontal guideline is the median level on the 5x5 chart, and the vertical is at 0 change. And so generally we want to see students above that line because that's performing in medium, high, and very high levels. But we especially want to see students to the right of that change line because that is the student groups that would be making growth. Chronic absenteeism has been an area of extreme focus. This was dramatically changed by the pandemic and has been an area of interest both in our school districts in our county and statewide. As a reminder, students are chronically absent if they miss 10% or more of their time enrolled, just dependent on the time that they're enrolled. And in this one, really want to call attention to that vertical line and seeing how a vast majority of student groups are to the left of that line, which is a good thing because that's declining chronic absenteeism. This is one of those indicators that we want to see smaller numbers because we don't want to see as many students who are chronically absent. This is a pretty significant change, and this is relatively consistent with what we saw statewide. And if you looked at sort of the press releases from the CDE and some of the other things, chronic absenteeism is substantially down for the first year since the pandemic, which is a very positive thing. And it's also why you see many, many fewer red dots on this compared to some of the other slides, that there's just fewer students in the red category because there's a lot of declining chronic absenteeism. I do want to prep the group here for something that may happen though. And I think in terms of like improvement a lot, and oftentimes if you've ever tried to make personal improvements, doing the improvement is hard, but sometimes once you get there, holding on to it is harder. And so oftentimes if you make an improvement and then hold it, that's usually a good thing. But we have so many student groups that are still very high chronic absenteeism, that's actually not going to be good enough in this case, because every student group that's above that red line, even if they just hold on to exactly what they did the prior year, they're all going to be in the red category. We really need to get these students out of that very high category in order to move them sort of out of the danger of being in the red category. So something that I'm a little bit concerned about is that we're really excited about the good work that's been done by our schools and districts in reducing chronic absenteeism, but there is a substantial risk of it looking like we're backsliding, even if we just hold on to the gains that we made this year. English learner progress is probably the most complex indicator on the dashboard because we're looking at really two-year intervals. We're looking at the improvement that students made on the LPAC, the English language proficiency assessment, seeing the improvement that they made between 2 years compared to the improvement that they made between another 2 years. This is just English learners and long-term English learners. And I did a little bit of a different chart for this one because it is just English learners and long-term English learners. Every district in the state is represented on this chart. The dots in purple, magenta color, are our county. The dots that are in blue are our region, the Bay Area region, and then all of the gray dots are all the rest of the schools in California. And again, kind of looking at vibes, it is kind of randomly distributed in some ways. There's not these sort of like clustering effect. I will say that in general, you can see that that sort of heaviest cluster is a little bit lower and a little bit further to the left than what the overall state trend is. And that's been pretty consistent for the last few years, that our work with our English learners has not always kept up with the trends that we're seeing in the region and in the state by a little bit. Alternately, graduation rate, which is the percentage of students who are graduating with their cohort, does continue to be high and very high for almost all of the students groups in our county. Most of our student groups are centered in that green and blue range in that higher, very high category for graduation rate. Suspension rate is another one that was really interesting to look at for us. This is students who have at least one suspension during the previous school year. And again, this is another one of those that we want to see student groups to the left of the line where we see declining rates of suspension. And again, there's very few red dots on this chart compared to others because of the higher degree of clustering of student groups that have made improvements, have declined in suspension rate. When the state talked about like improvements in the dashboard, a lot of the focus was on chronic absenteeism, which was certainly a big part of the pandemic, but we did recognize that there was a pretty big uptick in suspension rate as well coming out of the pandemic. Difficult student behaviors, students having a hard time adjusting back to being in the school context. And this is an area that in our county, we did see substantial improvement again. It wasn't this way with the state or our region. I have on the next chart looking at the means, the averages for the other counties in our region. And you can see that we're both lower in rate and substantially improved compared to the other counties in our region. And I think that's interesting because like with chronic absenteeism, if it's happening statewide, we have certainly had some influence in that, but there could be broader trends that are just sort of happening, whether it's state programs or just changes in culture and what's happening in the general public. But when you see something where we don't see the same trend in the state, and in fact, we don't even see the same trend in the region, then there's probably more action that our districts and schools have done to influence this directly than sort of overall general trends. And hopefully that makes sense. But I do want to highlight this because it's another area of substantial improvement that our schools and districts made that made a big difference in accountability. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. For college and career readiness, this is that multi-dimensional indicator that talks about how students are prepared for college and career. It includes things like, are students fulfilling A through G requirements? Are they meeting standard or above on the assessments? Are they completing their seal by literacy? Are they passing AP exams, IB exams? And you can kind of get credit for meeting this on a variety of ways. It is interesting to me from the standpoint of, first of all, it looks pretty narrow, which looks like it's going to be very, not much change in student groups compared to prior years. It's a little bit deceptive because you can see 3 tiny little dots in the far left that are like very, very low and very, very far declined. I actually think that might be a data entry error. This is an interesting indicator because we see a lot of problems with schools correctly reporting what's actually happening for this, because it depends on coding all of their classes correctly for A through G compliance. It requires them submitting AP and IB test scores correctly. And so this is, I think, still a work in progress, but it's not just are we actually getting students there, it's that are we actually mechanically recording and reporting the information correctly, which continues to be an issue for some of our school districts on this indicator. One last thing I wanted to highlight was the sort of average level change. A challenge of the dashboard when looking at it at the county or state level is a lot of people say, okay, so give me the overall general trend. And it's intentionally not meant to be aggregated that way because it's meant to be primarily used as a communication tool between communities and their school district for things like LCAP engagement and other sorts of strategic planning purposes. I'm trying this to see if this can kind of give us an overall view. This is showing every student group in the county for every indicator, and just were there level changes? So did student groups move from yellow to green, making one level of change in growth, or did they move the other way? So positive numbers are making positive levels of growth on average. Negative numbers are making negative levels on growth. And this highlights some of the trends that we saw from the charts. Chronic absenteeism and suspension rate, overall, levels of change that were positive across almost all student groups. Graduation rate was a little bit improved. CCI was a little bit improved. A concern going forward is going to be those flat, almost completely flat academic indicators. So like I said, the dashboard is really meant as this tool that spurs good questions, drives inquiry, is a communication piece between communities and their schools around LCAP so they can dig deeper, find root causes, and embark on this collaborative continuous improvement process and strategic planning process. It is also our accountability system that in our agreement with the federal government that the dashboard determines what districts are eligible for assistance as part of our accountability plan. We call that accountability plan differentiated assistance. And so school districts are eligible for differentiated assistance if a student group is in the red indicator across two or more indicators, two or more priorities. So for example, this student group would qualify for differentiated assistance because in priority 4, they're in the red, and in priority 6, they're in the red. So if they're in the red in 2 or more priorities, then that student group qualifies the district for differentiated assistance. A little overview of the differentiated assistance situation. We had a number of districts in differentiated assistance last year, and the first group I want to talk about are these districts who are exiting. Now, last year, the state made a change in how differentiated assistance was administered. Districts are now eligible for 2 years, regardless of what happens in that second year. So these districts are still receiving support from our office around these issues, but the support this year is going to be to make these improvements permanent because these student groups and areas of identification are no longer qualifying the district on this year's dashboard. So all of these districts saw improvement in these areas and are no longer meeting the criteria, although they will continue for their second year of the 2 in differentiated assistance. The next group of districts to talk about are districts who exited a lot of student groups, but then added another student group. So these 3 school districts saw a lot of their student groups improve and have a lot of student groups exited, but they did end up with new identifications in those 3 areas. So the exited is going to be highlighted in blue. The new identifications I highlighted in yellow for these student groups. These 2 school districts saw a mix of all the above. They have some student groups that continued, highlighted in orange, some student groups that exited because they improved, and some student groups that are added as new student groups identified for differentiated assistance. And then finally, we have, yes. Thank you. I should have defined that. That is long-term English learner, and it is a new student group on the dashboard this year. So it is students who have been in U.S. schools for 7 or more years and are still not yet proficient on the English language proficiency assessment. So they have to have been in our schools for 7 or more years. So when a student comes to our schools, the family is, in part of registration, is given a home language survey to find out are there languages other than English spoken at home, and if there are, students are given an initial assessment to see, are you fluent in English, or do we need to provide English language development services? And so then from that point, if a student has received English language development services in our schools for 7 years and is not yet proficient, then they are classified as a long-term English learner.
Sorry, I know, I understand. Sorry, I'm new at this. Um, when this information is shared to with the districts, is it then broken down just by district, or is it broken down by school, grade level, or how is it broken down?
The dashboard is broken down by district, first of all, and then you can get every individual school's readout of all of these as well. So the dashboard itself does display district and school. Then if you continue to dig deeper, because like there's more reports that you can find, and you kind of link follow, and then you can get, you know, individual grade levels and continue to sort of drill down in the data as you sort of click through more links. But the initial pages is district and school.
Does it get broken down into the individual student so that that individual student can maybe be pulled out to give instruction?
That would be part of the process of what I was speaking about, that sort of inquiry thing, that if we're at the public level, we don't identify individual students,
Right.
but we would hope that the school community, in engaging with their parents, would ask the right questions. They'd collect additional data. They would find out like what might be some reasons why the students are not making the progress that we expect. And then with the school's resources and the information that the schools have internally, target some additional resources to make those improvements.
And then what support do we give the individual districts and schools to help them do that? Because is there additional funding, additional teacher credentialing that gets done? What is the support the county does?
Yeah. We are funded by the state. The county offices are to provide this assistance in differentiated assistance. It is a major defined function of our office, and Executive Director Dardanelle leads the team that primarily supports districts through this process. It is one that we are working with them side by side on their particular concerns and support needs to both support the problems that they're seeing in the data, but also to build capacity so that they have more skills to do this inquiry and improvement on their own when we're not providing assistance anymore. We have had the opportunity to share some detailed information about that work in the past, and I think we could probably share some of the work that the county superintendents have produced about the impact that that sort of collaboration and support has.
And then do we contact other counties to see if there's best practices that we're not doing, but, you know, some other county is doing to try to get improvement?
Yeah, we meet every month, both with the Curriculum Council and the Geographic Lead Agency, which is another piece of the California Systems of Support that has been established, where there is a lead agency for our region. This year it's Santa Clara, and we meet to talk about those exact issues. That like, how are we working together on these sorts of things? What are the challenges that we're encountering as we're doing the work, and how can we share resources and information so that we can all improve?
Okay. And then one more question is, when a student comes in as from a foreign country or and they become a long-term English language learner, if they move from one city to another, then I'm assuming the CUME file that's in the CUME file and gets transferred to the new districts and new schools?
Yeah, the data point that is part of the state data system is the U.S. schools entry date that establishes that, and that does follow the student with their record to any school in the country.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, we have the districts that are identified new this year who were not previously receiving differentiated assistance and have been identified for the first time under these student groups this year. It is maybe of note that we are tracking in some cases where we have worked with some of these districts in the past. So we're not stepping in year one, like doing the same exact thing. It's like, okay, we've worked with you in the past. Let's pick up the work, even though we have had a gap in support. The charter schools that we had been supporting did exit, and they are a little bit different. The 2-year support rule is only for school districts. Charter schools receive 1 year, so we will no longer continue providing assistance to these charter schools. Overall, if we look at the student groups who are identified, 23 student groups individually are identified for differentiated assistance in last year's dashboard, and 21 out of the 23 exited, which is huge. That's substantial improvement. And I want to highlight again, the chronic absenteeism and suspension rate reductions, because that's really why so many districts exited differentiated assistance. Some of those student groups are still in those red indicators on academics, which was another very common area. But again, since you have to be identified across 2 indicators, lowering chronic absenteeism and suspension rate did remove them from the differentiated assistance. The other thing I'll just sort of acknowledge is that there aren't any schools that are identified, any districts that are identified for students with disabilities this year, which is a pretty significant difference for statewide trends as well. In their place is this new student group, long-term English learners, which is the most frequent identified group. It makes up half the identifications this year. And there is a lot of talk statewide about how long-term English learners are going to become the most identified student group for accountability systems, the way that it's currently constructed. And, you know, it's going to cause us to have to think about how we're going to change our supports and strategies in order to support districts through this new challenge. That, I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Trustee Love.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Prolo. That was an awesome report as usual. I just listening to you and then thinking about the data had a question. When we look at the CAS data and everybody is, you know, just upset because maybe 50% of students across the county, maybe 55% it was at 3rd grade or at standard. But then we see 91% are graduating from high school. And so it feels like, is there an issue with the test that isn't really a good predictor? I mean, these kids have gotten through these big suburban high schools and have graduated, and that's an enormous accomplishment. But we have this sort of this negative, like students aren't doing well in school all the time by all of these state tests. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think that's the motivation for the college and career indicator, is that the graduation rate was the huge standard, and in some cases, students were very well supported to be able to graduate. And in some cases, districts were able to improve their graduation rate. And so the college and career indicator, as that sort of multidimensional thing, is saying, okay, we're going to recognize that students might have different pathways to get prepared. They might take a CTE pathway and do their capstone in CTE. They might show that they're ready through IB or AP testing. They might show that they're well prepared by being biliterate, having the state seal of biliteracy. And so I think where you might see a little bit clearer distinction of where students being prepared versus students being able to graduate is looking at those differences between the CCI and the graduation rate. And I think that really was the motivation for including that CCI indicator.
It just seems like it pulls in so many other things, like graduating from high school is an enormous accomplishment. And now we've kind of muddied it with all these other indicators that are showing that the students aren't actually doing as well as we thought they are when we're looking just at graduation rates.
A recognition that being truly prepared for participation in career, their communities, and college does now require more than just having a diploma.
Trustee Alvaro?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pearl. You always give us so much data to think about and you parse it really so that we actually understand it. But I did have one question and I have a comment. When we talk about graduation rate, and I know I've asked this before, you say graduating with their cohort. Are we talking their 9th grade cohort or their K-12 cohort?
It is their 9th grade with an asterisk that we're also going to count, like there are 5-year graduates that do count in that cohort. So it gets adjusted as students may be summer graduators or, so it's not just a strict with their 9th grade in 4 years. There is a little bit of complexity, but they do count it still from 9th grade.
Yeah, so we're still not looking at whether kids who enter our schools in kindergarten make it through 12th grade. We just don't look at that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not your fault. It's just, I keep bringing it up and maybe one of these days somebody will say, wait, there's an idea. And I just wanted to mention on the long-term English learners, there's another factor, and I have observed this in my community. I've observed this with people I've talked to all over the county, which is that when English is not spoken in the home, the kids are more likely to stay as long-term English learners. And I actually know a number of kids who came into kindergarten in our county, born in the United States, not speaking a word of English. And so they've been long-term English learners, even though they were born here. So I realize that this is not your purview, but I just sort of throw it out there that I think if we really want to improve the long-term English learner success, it's not just a matter of looking how we serve the student in the school. I think it's a matter of looking at how we help support the family to become proficient in English, to become able to then support that child in his education. I've just observed it too many times where I found it a few years ago before the pandemic. We had a group where we had 3rd graders, we called it reading club at the library, and we had 3rd graders that were referred to us by their teachers as needing support in reading. All of those kids were long-term English learners. At least half of those kids were born here. So, and they're not the only ones, that was just what really opened my eyes to it. So I just say that, throw that out there. I think we need to look at how do we support the family? And I know there's one more thing for the school district to do, but it should be something more, the community needs to understand that there's something else going on here. It's not just the schools aren't doing a good job. It's that we collectively need to do a little bit more to make it so these kids can be successful. Thank you.
And Trustee Benini?
I have a question related to Ms. Alfaro's question. I've heard from a number of, educators that, and I don't know what the grade level is necessarily, but once the students pass 3rd grade or 4th grade, that the test is it changes and it's harder to pass. So I'm wondering if we think that it might be the tendency for students to stay as a long-term English learner might be, coincide with that. I've literally heard teachers say, well, I wish my student had been able to take that this year because next year I don't think they're going to be able to pass it, like in a certain classroom environment. I'm just curious, your thoughts
Yeah.
on that.
When we adopted the LPAC, it did make some pretty substantial changes. And one of the big changes compared to the prior assessment that we used was that it became very academic language intensive that was adequate to the content of that grade level. So for example, the writing sample might be related to a science lesson that's grade appropriate for the assessment that's being given. So the difficulty does increase, appropriately so. We would expect a 10th grader to be able to have the English to interact in their classroom at a level that a 10th grader would, no longer at the same level as when they're in 5th grade. So the grade bands, the tests are split up in a 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12 grade bands. And there is that sort of leap in difficulty between 5th and 6th, 8th and 9th grade. as an aside, there has been some hesitancy that used to exist for some schools where they would not want to reclassify a student in that last year before they switch schools, because they're thinking that, oh, there's so many changes, we want to continue to give this student supports. I don't hear of that practice anymore, because I think that people sort of caught on that when a student's ready to reclassify, like they're proficient, reclassify them. The challenges of the test are significant, and I think that the other thing I hear about that is going to be probably something that our districts will work on continuing to address is high school students getting kind of burnt out on trying on the test. That you're sitting in front of this test for the third year in a row, and you don't seem to understand why this is connected to why you don't get an elective anymore. And there is actually kind of an effort problem that sometimes takes place.
Is there, just one more question, is there an indicator or a way that we can know how much intersectionality there is for these long-term English learners, for instance, with students with disabilities?
I'm sorry, what was the end of that?
So like of the long-term English learners, the percentage that are related to different demographic groups, if it's more represented by different groups?
Maybe. I think that might have to come from the districts. Oftentimes that sort of like intersectionality is requires student level data. So sometimes it is hard for us, but I could look into that.
Thank you.
I will just add from my principal perspective and working with LCAP or LPAC, there are 4 sections to that test. So it's the reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And they might score really high in some areas and then really low in certain areas that prevent them from exiting out. And I think there needs to be more training for the teachers in regards to what the tests look like, not to teach to the tests, but to help them enhance what they're doing in the classroom to support the efforts for that. That's something that I'm currently doing with my school site, and I see it as a need, but I just wanted to add that. Trustee O'Neill, you had your hand up? No? Awesome. Trustee Camacho?
Thank you for the data slides and for your real in-depth knowledge of all the things, all these things related to these indicators. Thank you, Trustee Alvaro, for highlighting that there are students identified as long-term English learners who are born here. So it's not always the case that they're born elsewhere. I was struck by when you said districts eligible for, or LEAs eligible for differentiated assistance have to meet, a subgroup has to meet, has to be in the red in 2 priority areas, but not 2 sub-priority areas. So you can be red in ELA, red in math, but higher in all of the other priority areas. But what I'm getting at is persistent red over time. That district is not going to be eligible for differentiated assistance in their priority 4 area.
I did leave out a little bit of detail because there's sort of this weird logic thing that happens. ELA and math are really paired together as sort of one, and you're in the lowest category if you're red in both or red in one and orange in the other. And so there is that sort of additional little logic that goes into just the ELA and math, which are sort of paired together as one.
So let's say that this an LEA is doing okay in priorities 5, 6, and 8, although I'm sure they are related, right? The performance we're seeing on CAS is probably related to those other priority areas. But let's say that they are able to address those other issues in areas 5, 6, and 8. Could a district be eligible for differentiated assistance when there's a persistence in red or orange in just the priority area 4?
Not the way that the accountability is written currently.
So then that would just be left to the district to really figure out, like, we've got this persistent thing for this subgroup. Okay, thank you for that clarification. And I love your intersectionality question, because there's so much involved in that, right? Of seeing, like, how do we look at this data even clearer and understand the multitude of diversity of our students and how they experience school. It also makes me think about how this data intersects with itself in other ways, because I know we constantly stand by the statement that students that aren't in school can't, well, I won't say can't learn, but students who aren't in school aren't absorbing what's happening in school. But I'm also curious about whether anyone is looking at, for students who are chronically absent, how is it related to the other areas? Because we do also know that there are some students that, perform just fine without being at school. And, just to be honest, like last week, I received 2 text messages from my school, from my teachers at my school that said that your child will be watching a movie for 3 days next week. Like, that is not a valuable use of my child's time in school. And so I'm thinking about, how do we account for that, where students are actually progressing and doing and being successful in school through these metrics? I don't know. Do you kind of get where I'm going with that? Like,
I do a little bit, and I think that's kind of the beauty of the dashboard, right? Is that all of that stuff is represented, right? And so if and this is why across 2 priority areas becomes important, because if you have high test scores and you have low suspension rates and your chronic absenteeism's a little bit high, like, yeah, you're probably better off reducing it, but you're not going to be identified for
Got it.
accountability purposes, right? We're really identifying that if you have these low performances across multiple areas, that's where we're seeing more, like, we can rely on it being more systemically an issue, right?
yeah. Another thing I wanted to thank you for is, I know we're always cautious about releasing the names of districts, and definitely releasing the names of schools where we want additional support for those places. I was struck by, this morning, I actually read an opinion piece by Joe DeSalvo, who just retired after 4 terms on the County Board of Ed in Santa Clara. And he highlighted, which I never really thought about this, is that charter schools are required, like, if they don't meet these things, they have to close now. And traditional districts don't have that same thing. So we can continue to present this data over and over and over again, but how do we make the progress that we're hoping to make? So that's kind of the impetus of my question. So that's not really a question for you, but it did make me think about, like, what do we do with this data? Because I always try to remove my educator hat that I have, and I try to put it on as a member of the community who's like, what do you want me to do with this? Because I've got this score report from my kid, and I still struggle with understanding that. And I heard they could change the colors. Have you heard about that? Did they change something on the individual reports?
Mhm.
I don't know if you heard. Yeah.
They're going to change the language on it now too, and that's going to be an interesting one.
Lovely. So I'm trying to figure out how the county office kind of helps districts help their community use this data better. Because I know I'm assuming it really helps educators try to do their jobs better. How does the county office help districts help their communities understand it and engage with it better?
That's a big part of our work this year. It is part of our strategic plan to really improve that aspect of community engagement and community understanding. So I hope that we will have some things to share soon, because it is sort of in the planning stages, but it is stuff that we are actively talking about and working on as part of our strategic plan as an office.
Thank you so much. Your knowledge on this and your commitment to it is just beyond off the charts. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I have a question, sorry. I know our county website has a summary report for families. Is that something that's given to us or something that the county office does?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So I know the SNCOE website has a summary of the dashboard. Is that report done by the county office or is that given to us?
So we have started to take a bunch of public data and sort of like begin making sort of an open data portal that has a lot of visualizations and dashboards for a lot of different things. It is on the Center for Learning Analytics page. Some of those things are in really active development, but it is all public data that's just sort of been reshaped. But we're hoping that that can help our districts and communities to see things in a different way and assist in their conversations.
Yeah, I just want to say that the reports are very digestible for families, and I love that it's also available in Spanish for our other families. And do we know if we need to make it available in other languages? If we have something to get input from the community, if we need it other than just English or Spanish. But that's it.
Take that into account. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any comments from the public? There is no action to take on this item. For item 10A, Kevin Baltima, Deputy Superintendent, Business Services Division, Minette Mineo, Executive Director, Internal Business Services, and Marianne Reyes, Manager, Fiscal Services, will present the 2024-2025 first interim financial report. Team, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Board President Torres, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. I'm really just going to introduce the two behind me. They do all the heavy lifting. I'm going to get out of their way, let them explain the first interim budget.
Good evening. Okay, so we're here to present the first interim. So on our first slide, we just wanted to note the changes that we've made from the original budget to the first interim period. So we did a recalculation of the LCFF using the FICMAT calculator. We also did some position control analysis to make salaries and benefits the numbers that we have, reviewing vacant positions and any changes on FTE. We also did some changes on the multi-year projection, including and accounting for the enterprise resource planning software. So that's the financial software that we're transitioning now. And also updating restricted program carryover amounts based on actual carryover and any update of allocation from CDE. So our next slide is the income statement showing our unrestricted and restricted revenue. So on the unrestricted side, we have 44 million, and on the restricted is 35 million. I just wanted to note that on the LCFF, even though we get that 70 million, we are required to return about 36 million back to the state for the excess property taxes. So going further down on the unrestricted, we have total expenditure of about 44 million and restricted side of expenditure of 39 million. So this slide just shows a graphic representation of our revenue. The bulk of our revenue coming from LCFF, followed by the local, state, and federal. So again, that 71 million, we have to return back 37 million of that for excess property taxes. The next slide is just our expenditure showing the percentage of, how we're spending those funds. So the biggest one, adding in certificated classified salaries and benefit, account for 43% of our budget. Followed by that 29% of that excess property tax. And then the next major expenses will be at 24% for services. So here on this graph, we just pulled out some numbers that are accounting for that services account. So just to note some of the bigger numbers here, for the outer education at 1.3, that's the contract we have with YMCA. For the CECC, so that's the financial software that we're using. And then followed by the ERP implementation at 1.1. So that's the new system that we're transitioning to. The next big item is the transportation at 2.5, which is the contract for first student. On the restricted services, just to note on the San Mateo Health Commission at 1.7, and then the capacity grant at 2.9. So this will be a contract that the program is working with Santa Clara COE. And then also on the special ed at 1.8 for special service education services. So I'll be passing it on. The next slide will be discussed by Minette.
Thank you, Marian. Good evening, Board President Torres, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. I'm here to continue our presentation on our first interim budget. So on this slide, this is just the to highlight that top portion you probably saw on the SACS report under Fund 1, comparing our original budget to the interim revision. So if, in June, we presented to you a full budget, meaning budgeting for all the vacancies, assuming that programs will be operating at full cost. Now at first interim, we have made some adjustments. The very first line, you'll see that the LCFF has an estimated increase of about 1.6, and that is mostly attributable to the increase in property taxes. And then also a little bit of an increase in local revenue. So total revenue increased by about 2 million. Then going down our expenditures, as Marian mentioned, we did a lot of position control adjustments, and that is attributable to the meetings that our business staff has had with our program leaders in reviewing their program plans as it relates to the numbers of their budget. So we did look at certificated and classified salaries that are in their specific budgets. And, of course, attached to those salaries are the corresponding benefits. There are also adjustments in operating, which are the books and supplies, services. That capital outlay is attributable to the ERP implementation that we are undergoing right now with a go live of 7/1/2025. And as our property taxes revenue increase, there is a corresponding increase in the amount that we have to return to the state. So that's what you see in the other outgo as also an increase. Overall, our total expenditures is about break even from the total revenue. And then we go into the transfer in. The transfer in is because of the plan or the decision we made to support the ERP implementation by funding it through our savings account, Fund 17. So that is the transfer in from Fund 17. We also have some transfers out, that 534,000, an increase from the 140 from the original budget, is due to the transfers to support our early learning programs. So at the bottom, you'll see that at original budget, we were estimating to be in the negative of about 600. We have turned that around, and now it shows a positive number of 500,000. So I think in the past, we have shown the slides for our court and community schools. So we're doing the same now, comparing original to now first interim. For our gateway and community schools, the budget overall did not change, but there were shifts within the categories between certificated, classified, salaries, of course, employee benefits, books and supplies. So there were kind of shifts, but overall number did not change. Moving on to the Cayenne Oaks budget, there's not a lot of changes here. It's the same, just moving around between the categories within the operating expenses of the program, but overall number did not change as compared to original budget. Finally, with our Hillcrest schools, there is a bit of a change here as we have gotten more concrete or close to estimate numbers for our LCFF calculators. So we now have adjusted what we expect to be coming in from LCFF revenues or property taxes. And then, of course, to balance the budget, we have to make that contribution line. And also, if you see, there's also a little bit of shifts in the certificated, classifieds, and employee benefits lines, but not a lot of, no changes in books and supplies and services. So overall budget, it's still at the same funding level of about 1.4 million. So now I'm gonna move to our multi-year projections. But before that, I would like to point out the assumptions that we used in coming up with our multi-year. So our 23-24 and 24-25 budget continues to show a decrease in countywide ADA, or average daily attendance. We have also updated our position controls to calculate certificated, classified, and benefit costs. We have adjusted our revenue as our Rollins Road lease is expiring at the end of January. There is no plan, at least for Meta. They did not renew our lease. We also included step and column in cost estimate with a 1.5 savings due to maybe possible retirements. We have adjusted services, capital outlay, transfers in related to the ERP implementation. Our STRS employer cost is not changing. It's staying at 19.10%. However, PERS employer cost is projected to increase from 27.7% and 28.3% in the 2 out years respectively. And we did apply our consumer price index rates for 2.86% for 25-26 and 2.81% for 26-27. So this is just the representation of applying those assumptions based on what our interim numbers are and projecting for the 25-26 and 26-27 years. So using those assumptions, we are still showing a net increase in fund balance in 25-26, up a little bit over 300. But in 26-27, we are showing a deficit spending or a net decrease in fund balance of about close to negative 450,000. But I believe it shows that overall, even though that's the trend in 26-27, overall, we're still showing a healthy ending funding balance. And the numbers below shows how we are setting them aside at the end of, right now at first interim, and then in 25-26 and 26-27. So this is just another representation of how our multi-year projection looks like, highlighting the other outgo, moving it up so that it gives us a net COE LCFF revenue, giving that number more clearer, and then highlighting all the expenditures. Overall, it shows the same. It's just a different representation. And this next slide it's just a graphic representation of how our reserves has been in 22-23 and 23-24. Those are actual numbers. 24-25 is as of first interim, and then 25-26, 26-27 are based on our projections. Okay, so we have 3 interim reports require certifications. There are 3 kinds of certification. Positive, meaning we will meet obligations in the current year and the next 2 years. Qualified means we may not meet them in the current year and the subsequent 2 years. Negative means we will not meet it in the current or the next subsequent year. So we, SMCOE, is self-certifying that we will be, our first interim budget is positive. So just to summarize, SMCOE shows a budget that's almost balanced. However, you have seen that we did a transfer of that amount from Fund 17 to support our ERP implementation. There is also, we also show a deficit in the restricted programs because of the spending of the restricted carryover monies that expired. Also, SMCOE still maintains a healthy reserve in the general fund and in Fund 17, our savings account. Important to note that the compensation agreement with our teachers union, our SMCA group, is now included in our first interim budget. But there are future considerations that we have to remember. The classification and compensation study implementation, our multi-year agreement with our teachers group, and our continued implementation of SMCOE strategic plan, and increasing unrestricted contribution to restricted programs. That actually concludes our presentation, and we're open to your questions.
Thank you. Trustee Alvaro?
Thank you very much. You collectively always have such good reports that are easy to understand. But what I can never understand is this relationship we have with the state of California. And so, first of all, thank you for pointing out that 29%, a third of our total expenditures is going to be used by non-educational use in the state of California. And I just like, it's not that we're just giving it back to the state, we're giving it back to the state to not use for schools. I just need to point that out every single time because it makes me crazy. But I did have a question. On the slide where you showed the unrestricted only, and there's that big green arrow, our increased property taxes went up by about 1.6 million. But what the increase that has to go back to the state is 1.8. Why?
So the LCFF calculation is composed of a lot of funding buckets, including the decrease in ADA in our in our school programs. So that is offset by the increase in property taxes. So even though the number is only 1.6 in property taxes, it's being net by the decrease of funding attributable to the decrease in ADA, but still, because the calculation on the property taxes is still at that level, it still shows that we are still returning more than, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I will have to say, yeah, that's also my heartache whenever I have to write that wire transfer to them every single May.
Yeah, it's hard. Thank you.
Trustee Bonini?
Excuse me, thank you for the report, both of you. My question has to do with the multi-year projection reserves on slide 14. And then also, so I'll preface it with my question around Fund 17. You said that the ERP costs or some of that is coming from Fund 17. So first, could you, are you able to tell us the balance of Fund 17? And then help me understand, which I think it's a higher balance than I'm seeing on slide 14, why it doesn't get reflected here.
I believe the balance on Fund 17 is about 80. It's about 82 million. Sorry, what was this?
The second question is, so I'm looking at slide 14 and it's showing the reserves. The highest level from 22-23 shows that at 25 million, when I know that fund is much higher than that. So I'm not understanding why it doesn't show here, or just if you could explain that.
So I believe in 22-23, that's when we made a decision to move 9.8 million of what is in our unrestricted monies into Fund 17. So that's why if you see that under 22-23, we have that big purple bar. That's part of that. And we have moved that out from our general fund. And now that's why it's now sitting, or now it's moved to Fund 17, making it the balance at 82.
Okay, so then I guess my question is on slide 14 where it's showing the different amounts that are reserves.
Oh, sorry.
Why
So
does it's those are just restricted? Okay. I see. Okay, so the other funds that have restricted reserve amounts, yes. Right, right. For specific purposes. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Camacho?
Thank you. I think I noticed for the first time, this is the first time where the excess property taxes is more than 50% of our income now, right? I, t- I think it's another time for, sorry, I think it's another opportunity for conversation, public conversation about that it's now over 50%. This is the first time it's gone over 50%, yeah. And when we were talking about funding, I'm sorry, there's not a question here. I'm just going to warn you on that one. When we were talking about funding adequacy, it was so abstract the way we were talking about it. We ended up starting saying, you know, this amount would get you one more school nurse. This amount would get you that. And when I look at a number like $36 million versus what we spend because of what we have to give back, what would $36 million additional to this county office do for education in this county? I think we've reached that point now that we're at this 50% threshold of like, we got to put some real things behind this. $36 million not going to schools. So I think this changes the game at this point. It's extraordinary, but Minette and Marian, thank you so much for how you present the data. It's really helpful to see the story over time. And I love that we still call that section out, and I think we need to tell that story more. But thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Trustee Gerard?
Yes, I just wanted to comment on your comment. And it was very interesting at the conference in Anaheim. I was in 3 different meetings, and this was one of the prime discussions, and these were all county board. And I will say that there was a CSBA person in one of them, and when they were questioned, the answer was basically, well, we've tried and it's not worth trying anymore because they keep turning us down. But it is at the forefront with county boards.
Trustee Lev?
I just have a quick question. As we look at the implementation of the strategic plan, and that's mentioned in here, is there any possibility that the county office can seed the education fund for the county or play some kind of role in getting that fund going? Or are you looking at that as, well, I'm just going to leave it at that because it's a budget question.
Have Kevin address that.
So we're talking about using general fund unrestricted dollars to fund a foundation, education foundation. We would need to research that a bit more. The reality is if you look at the CSAM, the California Schools Accounting Manual, it references if dollars are received by districts or LEAs for specific benefit purposes, we have to keep those in a separate fund, Fund 19, but it doesn't speak to if we used our own dollars and put it into Fund 19. So we would need to research that a little bit further.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we do need to, are there any comments from the public?
No comments.
Okay, we do need to act on this item. Is there a motion to approve with positive certification for the 2024-2025 first interim financial report?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to approve with the positive certification for the 2024-2025 first interim financial report made by Trustee Bonini and a second by Trustee Alvaro. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 7-0, and the 2024-2025 first interim financial report has been approved with positive certification. Thank you.
Thank you.
For item 11A, Randy Perez, Executive Director, Personnel Commission Services, will present the 2023-2024 Personnel Commission Annual Report. Executive Director Perez.
Good evening. Let's use this. Is that on? There we go. Good evening, newly appointed President Torres, members of the board, and Superintendent McGee. I'm here to present the 2023-2024 Personnel Commission Annual Report. This is a report that we're statutorily required to put together every year. It's just a summary of our work and goals that we accomplished in the preceding year. So I'll start by talking a little bit about the Personnel Commission. Much like a governing board, it is an independent governing body made up of 3 commissioners, and they serve staggered terms to ensure that we're able to establish a quorum and carry out business. And they're responsible for overseeing the implementation of the merit system. So San Mateo County Office of Ed does operate within a merit system, and there are 2 overarching fundamental goals of the merit system is to ensure that employment hires are based on highly qualified candidates and not on political influence or bias or favoritism. And the second goal is to ensure that job applicants and candidates are provided proper due process rights. The core functions of the merit system, as I shared, open competitive selection. I think that, we want, this is, our salaries are funded by public dollars. And I think the public has an interest to ensure that, there's a vetting process, right? That, where we're ensuring that the people that are taking these jobs are highly qualified. So we base our assessments on the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are required to successfully perform in the job. The commission also establishes class descriptions and pay structures. I'll be talking a little bit about the comp class study that we recently approved. We also adjudicate a variety of protests and appeals. Again, thinking back to providing due process to job applicants and employees. We also approve personnel policies to ensure the efficient operation of the classified service. So about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we overhauled our merit rules. We revised about 24 articles within the merit rules. And then of course, we collaborate with our employer, the superintendent, to ensure that we're meeting the employer's need and aligning with her vision. So we have 3 commissioners. 1 commissioner is appointed by the classified employees. That would be the largest bargaining unit, which is CSEA 887. That's Veronica Palmer. We have a commissioner that is actually appointed by the governing board. That's Karen Schwartz. And then those 2 commissioners appoint the 3rd commissioner, which is Annette Shreve. She's the commissioner appointed commissioner. And then for staff, myself, Lisette Quintanar is our Personnel Commission Analyst, and Sylvia Pei, our Personnel Commission Specialist. So this past year, our focus was on 3 primary goals. Big one was the class and comp system, or class and comp study. I felt like this kind of impacted other work goals and tasks. And so laying this foundation was really, really critical to our operations. It impacted our recruitment strategies, as well as our work in aligning with SMCOE's vision for equity. So the study was actually started in March of 2023. So it was actually the year before, but bulk of the work was conducted last year, working with the consultant, our employees, our management, cabinet, making sure that the major milestones of this project were getting pushed forward. And then in this past October, the Personnel Commission approved the study. But the study had 2 main phases. It was the classification phase and then the compensation phase. The classification phase, for that part of the study, the most important part was really building a system. We really didn't have a system before the study. We had a bunch of job descriptions that did a pretty poor job of capturing the work that our employees performed. We didn't really have a system of classifying our positions. So the consultant came in and built these broadly based class structures or categories, and now we can build positions from those categories. For the compensation phase, the goal was to build a competitive compensation structure where we're looking at the top earning potential of our job classes, but we're also looking at non-compensable perks like our health and welfare benefits, longevity, PTO practice, paid time off rights, SDI and retirement contributions. We were looking at all of these things and how do we match up with the neighboring market. In the end, we had 37 classification modifications, 10 reclassified positions, and 6 new job classes. So the compensation study revealed that taken as a whole, we were about 3.6% above the median. The median is the most commonly used statistic in a study like this. Some people use the mean or average, but we find that there are outliers, whether it's like an agency that pays really high that would skew that number and bring it up, or on the flip side, an agency that pays really low and that would bring that number down. So we're looking at really the middle number. That's kind of like the most commonly used statistic. And our goal was to be 5% above that median. So, just based on the salaries, we saw that we were about 3.6% above the median. So we still had a little work to do to get to that target. But once we considered the compensation packet, or I'm sorry, the benefits, then that number dropped to 1.9% below the market median. So the goal of the consultant was to put together a plan that kind of positioned us so where we were more competitive with our market. It'd been about 20 years since we did our last successful study. I think the agency we tried to do a study about 5 years ago, but it wasn't successfully implemented. So this is, it's an accomplishment. It's been about 20 years. And this is one of the outcomes of the study. It's kind of a silver lining for us because we had talked about doing more marketing for our positions, never really getting around to it. Most agencies will just post a job description. If you were to go on any agency's ATS system, you'll see a job description as they're posting, right? But what we are doing now is being a lot more intentional, a lot more strategic in marketing our position. So we're talking about the department where the position exists, the team that they're going to be working with, the characteristics that we're looking for, and then front and center is the SMCOE's equity vision. We want to make sure that we're bringing in people that align with that vision. And then, like I said, we're aligning our work with SMCOE's equity vision, and this is done through our selection process. So for the next 3 slides, this is related to data that the first slide is related to recruitment and selection. You'll see that we didn't have as many recruitments as we had in the previous year, and that's not indicative of anything. It's just there's an ebb and flow to the work that we do, but that impacts the data that you see down below. We didn't administer as many examinations. We didn't have as many eligibility lists, but again, this is, there's an ebb and flow to this work. I do want to point out the applications received. You see that even though we had fewer recruitments, we did show that there was an increase in the applications received, and that tells us that, SMCOE still remains an attractive employment option for our employees and the public. For appointments and separations, we went down from the previous year. We had 47 hires, both promotional and new hires in 22-23 to 39 hires in 23-24. So again, we're doing less recruitments. There's not as many positions to fill. One thing I do want to point out is the substitutes. We've steadily increased our sub pool. I mean, that number is not going to blow anybody's hair back, but we are very aware that there are staffing shortages in our special ed program and court and community schools. So we've made a conscientious effort to build our sub pools. It has its own challenges. It's hard to find people that want to do this work on an on-call as needed basis without benefits and retirement contributions. And the people that are on our sub pools, they're also subbing in other areas. So their reliability is, it's difficult. It's really difficult. And this next data set, we didn't have a whole lot of data to report on this because we were going through a comp and class study. So a lot of the new job classes, we deferred to that process. And then goals going forward, now that we have the comp and class study done, we want to establish a system for where we're periodically reviewing our job classes and pay structures so that it doesn't, get out of whack. What happens when you're not looking at this for a long period of time, you naturally have these class errors and, redundancy in classifications. So put a process in place where we're, constantly reviewing this stuff. Continue to build effective recruitment and selection systems. And use CPI, continuous process improvement in our work. Since I've been here, I've consistently used CPI analysis to look at the work that we're doing, our service, and see how we can get better at what we do. And that's it. I do want to thank the IT and facilities departments. They're instrumental in setting up our rooms for when we're doing our meetings or running our exams. So, we can't do what we do without them. And then everyone that participated in oral panels as well, we want to thank them as well. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Are there any comments or questions from the board? I see none. Thank you. Are there any comments from the public?
No comments, but if I can say that Executive Director Perez was an amazing leader through the comp and class study. It's a very difficult thing to pull off without dismantling the entire organization. And everybody did their part. They leaned in, they shared their feedback. We slowed down to listen more. We made adjustments along the way and we kept on going. But Executive Director Perez's leadership is really stellar. And it's a very big deal that the county office was able to get ourselves into this position that we are. And the greatest thing is that it honors all of our employees. It really speaks to what we aspire to be as an organization.
Thank you. There is no action to take on this item. For item 11B, Kevin Baltima, Deputy Superintendent, Business Services Division, and Tammy Moore, Associate Superintendent, Human Resources, will present the public disclosure of the collective bargaining agreement between the San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools and California School Employees Association and its Chapter 158 for 2024-2025.
So the timing of this is very appropriate because we just talked about the class and comp study. And really this represents a one-year agreement to implement the class and comp study with our CSEA 158 group. We note that the total cost of this agreement is $612,151. That's an estimate. And because it is being implemented with an effective date of January 1, the fiscal impact will be about half of that for the current fiscal year. But we did want to point out that that is a cost that will be ongoing by moving to the new salary schedule. We're very pleased with this agreement. The reality was one of the priorities we had when we received the class and comp study was try and make adjustments as close to the classroom as possible. And it was noted that our paraprofessionals were some of the most under market funded positions that we had in our organization. So this implements the study. We're pleased with it. I would also report to the board that CSEA 158 has also ratified this agreement on their end. So we provide this as information to you and to the public.
Any questions or comments from the board? Any comments from the public?
No comments.
Thank you. There is no action to take on this item. For item 11C, the board will receive the initial proposal from California School Employees Association, Chapter 158, to the San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools for the 2024-2025 Reopener Collective Bargaining Agreement. This item will be brought back at the January 15, 2025 board meeting for a public hearing. Tammy Moore, Associate Superintendent, Human Resources, is available to answer any questions the board may have. Associate Superintendent Moore.
Good evening, Board President Torres, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. You have before you the initial proposal from CSEA Chapter 158 to the San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools for the 2024-2025 Reopener Collective Bargaining Agreement. And I am available for any questions you may have.
Any comments or questions from the board? Any comments from the public?
No comments.
Thank you. There is no action to take on this item. Thank you. For item 11D, the board will receive the employer's initial proposal for the San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools to California School Employees Association, Chapter 158, for the 2024-2025 Reopener Collective Bargaining Agreement. This item will be brought back at the January 15, 2025 board meeting for a public hearing. Tammy Moore, Associate Superintendent Human Resources, is available to answer any questions the board may have.
You. Additionally, to add to the last item, you do have the initial proposal from the San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools to CSEA Chapter 158, and I am available for any questions you may have.
Any comments or questions from the board? Any from the public?
No.
Thank you. There is no action to take on this item. For item 11E, the superintendent will have comments. Superintendent McGee, do you have any comments to share?
Just very quickly, congratulations to the new term 2 board members, Benini and Torres, on being reelected to your seats, and to newly elected board members, Love and O'Neill. Looking forward to working with you in the 2025 year. I also want to extend congratulations to Board President Hugo Torres. I learned through social media that you were recently named as the Region 5 Educator of the Year by the California League of Educators and California League of Middle Schools as principal at Voices flagship College Bound Language Academy. And that is a pretty significant honor to be the Educator of the Year as a second-year principal.
16 months.
16 months. There you go. So congratulations, Principal Torres. That's a really quite astounding. And finally, just wishing everyone a happy, safe, and healthy holiday season. I want to extend that to all of our staff, to their families, and to all of our board members and your families. SMCOE is closed to the public starting next Monday, December 23rd through Sunday, January 5th. We are open for business again on the 6th of January, 2025. That's all my comments.
Thank you. For item 12A, the board will discuss and act on joint resolution number 24-59 regarding the San Mateo County Board of Education joining the Association of California County Boards of Education, ACCBE. Board Member Gerard, would you like to start this discussion?
Yes, I really would like to reiterate my enthusiasm for our new ACCBE. And I would be happy to answer any questions that any of the board members may have, if I can, regarding it. I will say that the good news is that we're very excited that on Monday evening at their meeting, Placer County and Tuolumne County both voted unanimously to join the ACCBE. Are there any questions?
Trustee Alvaro?
I had the same questions I had last time, Ms. Gerard, which is, how is this going to affect our gamut? Our other, which, you know, I don't much like gamut, but it's what we use. And our other CSBA services, and what about the overlap in fees and not paying the county surcharge with CSBA? Have they made any decisions? Have they made any motion about how this is going to look? I mean, they meaning CSBA?
CSBA hasn't said anything about the overlap of any kind of funding. It doesn't affect our gamut services or any of those services at all. We'll still be a member of CSBA, and so consequently, any services that we're currently receiving from CSBA, we will continue to receive. There will be no change there. It was discussed at the conference, but CSBA is remaining very silent on anything that has to do with any kind of fees and the way that they calculate all of our fees, not only just county boards, but school districts as well. They're not being forthcoming with any information at all.
So we made a decision a while back to withhold, we paid our CSBA fees.
Right.
We paid our gamut fees, we paid all the other things when we made a decision to withhold the piece where they were going to charge us double basically for existing. We're still doing that, and here we are at the end of the year. So my question is, there's been no mention, and I understand you said they were silent. I'm just saying about, they're not going to suddenly go, well, you didn't pay your.
No.
Okay.
Can I
Yes.
add on? So I met with Beverly and with many other county board members who are have, been working to form the entity when we were in Anaheim, and asked them very pointed questions, exactly as you've raised them, because I wanted to be able to have that, answer that if I could. What I learned, in addition to what Trustee Gerard has shared, is that there are a number of other counties who have not paid the former CCBE portion. And most all of them also use Gamut, and they're paying the same as we are. And that the percentage of the amount of fees that from our budgets, that we pay for that amount it's very minuscule. It's something, I think Beverly had some stats about it, but it's like fractions of a percent of budget, right? And so I was also had that similar concern, because obviously we want to make sure we have consistent service. I think it was really incumbent upon CSBA to address it, and they haven't, and it's been this long. And so I'm really comfortable with the fact that those fees are better placed in this new organization that will really have many other, it will be performing a lot of different very useful services for us, and we will be able to participate in those that CSBA really is not doing in terms of our advocacy, the issues that we have raised tonight around the excess property taxes, those kinds of things. Those are issues that the ACCBE will focus on, probably not CSBA. And so I feel really confident about that. And you're right, we haven't heard from CSBA. And I think we should have, if they had an issue with it, I think they should have raised it, but they have been, as Beverly said, silent.
Well, they made a promise, I think, that they were going to have a resolution for the December meeting that you went to and got absolutely no answers, right?
No. Are you talking about CSBA?
CSBA, yeah.
Yes, we met with them on Tuesday morning, the group that was in the transition group. And basically, the questions that we had been asking, other than the very general ones that they did address, and that was sent to all county board members. Any of the things about budget and transparency were not answered. And what I can say is that we're paying our CSBA dues. As I said, we'll get all those services. Gamut is actually a separate fee from the CSBA. So as long as we pay that and we belong to CSBA, we get that service. And the fact that they are refusing the transparency is concerning not only to us, but to district boards as well. It's something that county boards brought up, that district boards now are, and the board of directors are also saying, hey, wait a minute, how do you figure out all this money? Because what we pay is minuscule compared to some of what of the larger counties pay. And our fee actually for CCBE was $4,225 a year. And one of the, Yvonne Chan of the LA County Board actually went through, which is amazing to me, every county in the state and calculated what percentage of their budget, and she used the county office's budget for the year 22-23 to figure out what percentage that was. That percentage of our budget, of San Mateo County Office of Education's budget for that year was 0.004. That's how much of the budget went to CCBE. So that's how it was calculated. It's on the website that we've established. So if you want to go in and look, you can do that and see exactly what it says.
Yeah, my concern isn't what is going to be paid to the new organization. My concern is what CSBA is going to turn around and say in a couple months, you didn't pay that. So
I honestly can't answer that because CSBA
Because
isn't
they
being
won't.
forthcoming with anything.
right.
And in fact, they're completely ignoring when it's asked. And it's been asked over and over and over. They know they're in hot water, quite frankly. They know they're in trouble with that because all of the county offices are screaming bloody murder that we're being charged double for things that district offices are receiving for the current amount of money that they're paying for their dues. And that's not fair. And so we're not the only ones questioning that.
Good. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, Trustee Camacho.
So if we adopt this resolution, this is committing us to being a paying member of this, right?
Pardon me?
If we adopt this resolution, this is committing this county board to be a paying
Yes.
member. And so what are the dues for this county will be the same as what they were for CSBA?
Yeah.
It'll be that 4,000 something.
No, it's exactly the same.
Okay, so it's the same.
Yes.
What? And I'm assuming that it is, that initial pool of dollars is going to come only from boards that adopt this and become members, correct? So we have an unclear or ACCBE has an unclear sense of what budget they're going to be operating with.
We actually have a budget, and again, you can go into the website and see that, and there is additional monies. We actually have several people and organizations, including the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, that are giving us money as a feed to start the organization. So we've already been able to hire someone that is helping us with like our websites and all of those kinds of things with that feed money.
Okay. Yeah, I think. Were you gonna say something?
I was just gonna
Yeah.
add again,
Yes.
the hope is, I think that all the counties would join. But I think the fact is that not all the counties are actually members of CSBA, so we probably won't have all the counties. And so it's a they're working really hard to get all the counties on board. And so just the fact that recently or last week or whenever it was that Placer and Tuolumne and they're, so they were reporting out on it. I was just attending their subcommittee meeting, but seems like it's getting pretty good traction. That's my feeling about it.
We actually have a spreadsheet that we looked at our last meeting last Monday night with all the counties listed. And we have about 27 counties right now that have committed to joining in November. January, excuse me. I don't know where November came from. In January and February. And then there are others that are maybes, and there are only 2 out of the entire state that are no's.
It's just since it's a public discussion, I just want to be kind of upfront with my hesitations and where they come from. As an example, we heard from our own Center for Data and Learning Analytics, whatever that is, the title. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. There is so much reporting and so many agencies and so much overlap and so many things going into things that are not direct student service, don't provide direct student services. So much so that CSBA has commissioned this study on like, how many reports do we have to do? And I get nervous about creating another body in a time when CSBA, and I have lots of, all the thoughts I have about CSBA and its leadership, but CSBA has been able to establish itself as at least an influencer in policy in Sacramento. That is something that is a true thing, and it's taken time for them to do that. Alongside that, the California County Superintendents have more so allowed themselves to become an influencer on legislation in Sacramento. And so where my hesitation comes from is, how do you do this startup thing? How much does this startup thing take away from the efforts that, and it is slow progress, and you all know that I'm the least patient with slow progress in education. That's all this is based in, I'm nervous about that.
In January, we have slated 2 pieces of legislation that we're going to be addressing and working on. And we all have gotten the help of the San Diego County of Office Education and their private lobbyists are willing to work with us. And those 2 pieces of legislation, one is in partnership with the PTA on literacy, which is a direct reflection on students. And the second piece is on getting student board members onto county boards throughout the state. And that's the second piece that we're looking at. So those are our first 2 that we really want to look at and are very, very excited about. And we're working in partnerships with people that can help us do that. And part of our function, and it was the same thing with CCBE, is advocating for students, for our students. We have, I'm preaching to the choir here. We have completely different students than district students that we're dealing with. And we fall through the cracks. So part of what we're doing with our advocacy and all of the things that we want to address are meeting those needs of those students that are falling through the cracks. So we want to be very, very proactive with legislators and saying, and we've already started, by the way. There's a lot of legislators that know that what we're doing and are very supportive. Because that over the time, some of it gets through with CSBA, but a lot of it doesn't because they are for district boards. And I'll argue that till the death. So part of what we want to do with ACCBE, which we did with CCBE, is advocate and process and go after all of that legislation that wasn't addressed through CSBA.
And I'll just add that I understand the hesitations. I had the opportunity to connect with folks in Anaheim, specifically the board members of ACCBE and the drivers behind this group. I know is going to make an impact and be as influential, if not more, than the other organizations that currently exist. And I think our goal is to eventually to collaborate and get all people on board so that we have stronger groups attacking legislation and other issues that we want to tackle. As a group that's just starting, again, with the people driving it, I don't see the harm in trying it out this year. And if it doesn't work, we can revisit it for next year. And it's not a huge financial risk to embark on this. Just my thoughts. Trustee Bonini?
Oh, I also just want to add that in my questions to the ACCBE board and just around their goals and their purpose, and we did talk to them a lot about the student focus. Like, we brought your questions to that board, all of our questions from our board. And it's really whether, obviously working together with other organizations it's a two-way street, so they have to want to work with you. But there was no one in the room, in the table, that was saying that we wanted to go this on our own and like just do county boards. Like, we want to partner. They're already doing partnerships with the PTA, any organization that wants to partner. So if there's alignment with what's going on, I think the same as when it was CCBE, alignment with CSBA, like, we want to work with CSBA, and the Superintendent's Association. So, or any other association that's aligned. So I think it's a yes, it's a this and it's a growing concept. But I think that Bev's absolutely right that when I've participated in the legislative action days lately, last few years, there aren't county-focused issues. They can only focus on so many to sort of have talking points that it's rational, for a short period, but our issues don't make it to the top of the list.
I appreciate all that additional context and for taking the questions to Anaheim. I would reiterate Mr. Torres's highlight is, let's make sure we don't become another like we talked about cycles of continuous improvement, right? Let's make sure we continue to revisit that instead of becoming another entity that's just an entity for its own sake. That makes me happy that this is a group that's going to be committed to that, because I'm willing to try something.
Trustee Lev?
I just wanted to say, I was a little ambivalent about all of this before until I went to Anaheim and, there was a strand for county offices, but it wasn't a genuine strand. The sessions really weren't, I'm a new county board member, and this is going to help elevate my thinking. And that really was clear with the breakfast. I was just kind of blown away by the county board breakfast was CCE coming and doing a presentation, and they kind of compete with the county office on some things. So that was the decision to have present at that meeting just seemed like really out of touch. So my mind has shifted a bit since that meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, I'm seeing none. Are there any comments from the public?
No comments.
Okay, is there a motion to approve joint resolution number 24-59 regarding the San Mateo County Board of Education joining the Association of California County Boards of Education?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to approve joint resolution number 24-59 made by Trustee Gerard and a second by Trustee Bonini. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 7-0 and joint resolution number 24-59 has been approved.
Thank you so much. We won't disappoint.
Thank you for being patient with all those questions. But this, there's two sides of it. One is, what's this going to benefit us? Yes. The other is it going to come back to bite us later on? And We don't really know. So thank you for being patient.
You're welcome.
Thank you. For item 12B, the board will discuss its compensation and potentially act on changes. Superintendent McGee.
Thank you. The board has the opportunity to discuss and increase its compensation on an annual basis. And I would say that for this particular year, I would encourage the board to increase its compensation. We are in strong financial standing. We are current with all of our negotiations. There's no political overshadow on the board adding a few dollars literally to your monthly earnings. So my recommendation would be that you increase the amount this year, and I turn it back over to President Torres to lead the discussion.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any from the public?
No comments?
Is there a motion regarding the board's compensation?
Does,
So moved.
Is there a second?
second?
Do they have to state what the motion is?
Yeah, I think Board Member O'Neill just state, I move to,
I move to increase the board compensation to $378 a month.
there you go.
Thank you. And is there a second?
Second?
There is a motion to increase the board's compensation made by Trustee O'Neill and a second by Trustee Gerard. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The motion passes with a vote of 7-0, and the board has voted to increase its compensation. For item 12C, when an ad hoc subcommittee meets or a representative attends a meeting related to their given assignment, board members may choose to bring a report to the board at this time. Would any board members like to report out? Are there any comments or questions from the board? I'm assuming none from the public. Thank you. There is no action to take on this item. For item 12D, the board will discuss topics for future board agendas. Would any board member like to discuss agenda ideas? Yes, Trustee O'Neill.
Hi, I'd like to ask that there be an agenda item in January to form a subcommittee for the low-funded school districts for the county to begin a dialogue to see if we can do something about the lower fund districts. I checked with the superintendent, and there's at least 8 school districts in this county that are considered low-funded, low wealth. And I would like to see if we can have a subcommittee to meet with those and open a dialogue with board members, superintendents, et cetera, for those districts.
Are there any other agenda items or ideas to discuss or that you'd like to add on? Okay, thank you. There is no action to take on this item. For item 12E, board members will comment. Trustee Love.
Thank you. I just want to say that I am filled with gratitude tonight to be here with all of you, for the 28,000 plus voters who voted for me, and then for all of the County Office of Education people who have been my family for the last 7+ years. It's been wonderful, and we couldn't find better people to be in these roles. And I have a lot of gratitude for all of you and all the folks who aren't here, Jennifer, for working alongside me. So just a lot of gratitude tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee O'Neill.
I'd like to say I'm looking forward to working with all of you and meeting some of the challenges we have in education. My background, I was on the board of Pacifica School District 14 years, the city council for 10 years. So I have some, extensive background in elected office. And I also want to thank the staff because the onboarding process has been pretty easy. So thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
happy holidays, everybody.
Trustee Alvaro?
Thank you. I want to start out by saying goodbye to Administrator Love and thanking her for 7 years of service. The communications from this office, it's always been a challenge, and we've talked about it since I've been on the board. I've never seen them done as well as they've been in the last several years. You set a really high bar. I've actually looked forward to reading the school news and other things that come out of the communications office. So I wanted to just say thank you for your service, and we'll miss you. And then I want to say congratulations to Chelsea and Hugo, and welcome to Patricia and Mike. Wow, Hugo, Educator of the Year. You didn't tell us. We had to find out from Superintendent McGee.
I don't like to brag.
You know, as we move into what could be a very difficult period for public education, it is comforting to be surrounded by people who always have the student's best interests at heart. I mean, I know that we disagree on some particulars, but in the main, we sit here completely united for what the work needs to be done. Chelsea, I want to thank you for your leadership this past year. It's not been a real easy year, and you've represented us really well out in the world as well as here. And chairing the policy committee, I mean, what a huge lift that was. We're not done ever, but we got we got this huge thing done. It's all up online. It's all editable. It's all findable. And thank you for chairing that committee, because that was just a huge amount of work. And then Mr. Paris is gone, right? He's not here anymore. Well, I'll say it anyway. I think that was probably the most informative report from the Personnel Commission that I have heard in all of the years I've ever sat on this board. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I just think that was the most informative report I've ever heard. So thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you. Trustee Camacho?
I just would echo all of Trustee Alvaro's comments about welcome and congratulations and thank you. So welcome to our 2 new colleagues, and congratulations to President Torres, and thank you to Trustee Bonini for all she's done this year. Earlier this evening, I got to join the Santa Clara County Board of Education as they seated 2 new members who are friends to a lot of us in this room, Jorge Pacheco and Jessica Spicer, who are going to be incredible county board members in Santa Clara County. So I was really excited to be there for that. And then just a little minute on Anaheim. It seems like it was a long time ago, but maybe it was. Who knows what happens with time now. I appreciate, Trustee Love, you bringing up like the absence of a county presence was very apparent, more so than in past years. I think there was probably an assumption that an entity as big as CSBA could figure it out, and it was apparent that they did not, and I don't know that they want to. But what I did appreciate was being able to spend time with you all. While we were there in Anaheim. It's always also great to connect with other county board members across the state who knows if we're going to see each other as often anymore, given the new structure. But the annual conference is just a great time to refocus on good governance, on sharing of ideas, and just reconnecting with our colleagues. So I appreciate being able to spend time with all of you in Anaheim. Thank you, Superintendent McGee, for hosting us for a great dinner, which was a combination of board members and staff. So thank you for those of you that I was able to see down there. And I think that's it. So I'll just say, oh, and thank you again for those reports. I always feel badly because we ask these questions or don't ask questions, and they're just standing there like, well, it's not really you, it's the system. But I would please, if you can re-extend our thanks for the incredible professionalism and just the knowledge that they bring to every presentation it always knocks my socks off and makes me proud to tell others about the things that our people do. So thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Bonini?
Thank you. Well, I'll start by appreciating the very kind presentation. Thank you for that, Superintendent McGee. It was really such an honor to serve as president for the last year. Just there's so much that we can do together, and I really I enjoyed serving in that capacity, and I'm excited that Hugo, congratulations that you're going to be moving into that role. And, you know, we'll figure out who's going to do all the chairing and the committees. We have a lot of committees. Yes, we'll see. And so, yes, so thank you very much. I also want to appreciate the reports. I really enjoyed Mr. Prolo's report because it was just so detailed and as I think Trustee Camacho stated very eloquently, just like there's so much depth of his knowledge in that regard, and I learned a lot from listening. So I really, really appreciated that. I also wanted to appreciate May Tran for her amazing work with the county office. I know a lot of people who I've spoken with over the years who work with her, and she's just, I know that was very well deserved and very amazing. Welcome to our new board members. I look forward to working with you both in this capacity. And I want to wish everyone a restful break and happy holidays.
Thank you. Trustee Gerard?
Thank you. I'm also echoing Trustee Alvaro's comments. She always is very eloquent and says things so beautifully that I know I can't do as well. So I'll say ditto to Chelsea and to Patricia and to Mike. Is it Mike or Michael?
Mike.
Mike, okay. Some people are very particular, so I just want to make sure. And the reports were amazing tonight. You're right. There was tons of information and all of it so important. And I've learned a little trick over the years. I'm usually real quiet because if I wait long enough, everybody else on the board asks all the right questions and I get all my answers and I just have to sit here and smile. And that happened tonight. So thank you all for being eloquent. I also want to thank you again for approving the resolution. We're working really, really hard and having pretty much weekly meetings that are lasting 2 to 2.5 hours, but nothing until after the first of the year now. So that's good. And I was very disappointed, quite frankly, in the CSBA conference, and for all the reasons that everybody else has said. As far as networking went, that's always priceless. And not only being able to meet and talk with county board members, but also board members from other districts throughout the state. And I lost 2 cohorts that were always there, and I have to mention them, and that's Juliana Ferriani from Tuolumne and Janet from Monterey. And both of them, Janet lost her reelection and Juliana has retired. So it's a huge loss because both of them are amazing, amazing board members and people and huge advocates for students. So anyway, I want to wish everyone a very happy holiday and a very, very happy new year. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone next year. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start off by congratulating Trustee Bonini and then just thanking you for your year of service and then also working with you in that year to learn and just prepare me better for this role. So thank you. Welcome to our new board members. I'm really excited to do this work with this group moving forward. And our time in Anaheim was great. Thank you to Superintendent McGee. It was really great to have the team there with the board. I think we should need to start doing that more frequently. That was just a beautiful time that just flew by. But it was very meaningful, a lot of beautiful conversations, and it just deepened our connection and a reminder of our why, our collective why. So that was just beautiful. And just thank you for entrusting me with this role. I feel very honored and very privileged. And I just love all of you. So thank you. And I hope you all have a great holiday break. Item 13 is the adjournment. The next regular meeting will take place on Wednesday, January 15th, 2025 at 7 p.m. And this meeting is now adjourned.